When someone is blowing smoke up your ass today, it is a figure of speech that usually means they are complimenting you insincerely to inflate your ego. Welcome to You Won't Believe History, where today we discover that blowing smoke out of one's ass wasn't always metaphorical. But back in the late 1700s, this wasn't a metaphor. It was a mainstream medical procedure where doctors literally blew tobacco smoke up a patient's rectum. This wasn't some back-alley ritual, but a cutting-edge resuscitation technique for people presumed dead, particularly drowning victims along the River Thames. In fact, tobacco resuscitation equipment was hung along major waterways, and citizens were expected to know their locations, much like we look for public defibrillators today. At the heart of this practice were two London physicians, William Hawes and Thomas Cogan. In 1774, they were deeply worried about the number of people wrongly taken for dead and buried alive. The fear of being buried prematurely was a cultural obsession of the 18th century. In France, a new class of professionals emerged called croque-morts, or dead biters, whose job was to bite the toes of the deceased to ensure they weren't actually in a coma. Hawes and Cogan formed the Royal Humane Society to find a more scientific solution, believing that many victims could be brought back to life if a stimulating treatment were applied immediately. The medical logic of the time was rooted in the ancient theory of the four humours. Physicians believed health was maintained by a delicate balance of air, water, fire, and earth within the body. Drowning victims were viewed as having an excess of cold and wet humours. To restore life, doctors needed to introduce something hot and dry. A warm, stimulating vapor like tobacco smoke seemed like the perfect cure. While this might sound bizarre to us, the choice was based on a long history of medicinal use. Christopher Columbus had observed Native Americans using tobacco plants for a variety of medical treatments centuries earlier. The mechanics of the procedure were as direct as they were invasive. Rescuers originally used a standard smoking pipe, but this posed a significant occupational hazard. If a rescuer accidentally inhaled instead of blowing, they risked aspirating the contents of the patient's diseased bowels. To solve this, the Royal Humane Society provided kits containing a specialized fumigator and a bellows to force smoke into the rectum through a tube. One of the most famous success stories occurred in 1746, when a man reportedly revived his unconscious wife by shoving a lit pipe into her rectum and blowing through the end. The heat of the embers had the intended effect and brought her back from the brink. However, the practice eventually led to a peculiar economic scandal. To encourage the public to help, the Royal Humane Society offered a reward of 4 guineas, roughly £450 today, to anyone who successfully revived a drowning victim. Almost overnight, the number of successful resuscitations along the Thames increased exponentially. It appeared that people were faking drownings and revivals just to collect the bounty, turning a life-saving procedure into a lucrative medical scam. The end of the tobacco smoke enema came not from a change in fashion, but from the laboratory. In 1811, an English scientist named Benjamin Brodie conducted animal experiments that proved nicotine was actually a cardiac poison. He demonstrated that instead of stimulating the heart to beat faster, tobacco smoke could stop the circulation of blood entirely. Within a few decades, the practice was abandoned by the medical community. We may no longer see tobacco kits hanging by the river, but the phrase remains, a linguistic ghost of a time when the difference between life and death was a well-timed bellows of smoke. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button as we continue to bring more shocking historical practices.